What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Poet Mary Oliver gets right to the heart of a question that many of us have grappled with. You might be grappling with it right now. You may be ready to get involved and really eager to make a difference, but not sure exactly where to start. It could be you're looking for that one special thing that you could get really passionate about. If that's what you're searching for, I'd like to suggest that you stop looking for it, because there isn't one thing that you could get passionate about. In fact, there are many issues you could choose from. Don't hold out for the perfect opportunity. There's no such thing. But there are opportunities to get involved all around you every day. You'll never be sure of your path until you head down it and get deeply involved. But if you follow your interests, there's a very good chance that the passion will grow. It took me more than 45 years to find my path, so I know that this journey can be a long one with unexpected turns and sometimes false starts and dead ends. For the last 14 years, I've led a community-based environmental group. I've helped it grow from a small group of women to a strong and healthy organization that serves as a model for other similar groups all over the north and northwest suburbs of Chicago. Our work, protecting the planet at the local level, has become my passion. But I had absolutely no idea when I was in my early 40s that by the time I was 50, I would be completely engaged in environmental advocacy in my community. So how did I go from where I was then to where I am today? Finding my path has been a long and gradual process, as it is for most people. But truth be told, I could have gotten involved in something entirely different along the way. Like you, I'm interested in all kinds of compelling issues, like education, injustice, poverty, world peace, even dog rescue. I could have headed down any number of paths. And it's possible that in my future, I could shift my focus or move on to a completely different passion. But right now, the path I've chosen feels like the perfect path for me. I'm not here to try to convince you to become an environmental advocate. That's my path. How do you find your path? The world is facing a lot of challenges. Not a day goes by that you don't hear about a problem that needs a solution. The opportunities to get involved and make a difference are almost limitless. But with so many choices, how do you possibly decide which path to head down? The answer is simple. Just choose something that you're interested in. In fact, if you're open and curious, you'll find that almost every issue can become a compelling one that you could get very passionate about. There isn't just one thing that could light your fire, and you will never be passionate about anything if you're standing on the sidelines. You have to choose an issue and get deeply engaged before you'll know you're on the right path. And if you think you need to be some sort of a superstar or have a unique skill or have unlimited time or lots of money to make a difference, you could miss the chance to make an incredible contribution right now, just the way you are. Do you like stories as much as I do about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, getting involved and engaged with an issue that they just can't ignore once they learn about it? These stories almost always start with an ordinary person who sees a problem and thinks somebody ought to do something about that. But instead of walking away, they choose to get involved. The exact issue they get involved with doesn't really matter. In fact, they've often stumbled upon it quite by accident. But it's their passion and commitment, their willingness to work hard to make a difference, that makes their stories so compelling. Today, I'd like to share with you a few of my very favorite stories of ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things. In each case, they happened upon an issue by accident, often unexpectedly, and later in life, and this issue gradually became their passion. Some of you may know the story of Susan Garcia-Trishman, founder of Kurt's Cafe. The story of how she found her life passion reminds us that life does not always go as planned. Susan was a busy, successful restaurant professional who was getting her long-postponed college degree on the side. One semester, as she was registering for classes with a complicated online registration system, she accidentally selected the wrong course. She meant to click on real estate law, but instead she clicked on the course listed directly beneath it, restorative justice. Short on time and not very computer savvy, she quickly read the course description and decided that it was just easier to take the class than figuring out how to unenroll. I am not making that up, that is really what happened. So as part of the course that she never intended to take, she toured jails, she met inmates, and she listened to their stories. Her heart opened up to injustices that she had never focused on before. She heard and learned that our system just does not provide the support and the skills that at-risk youth need to become productive members of society, especially if they've been in jail, often for very minor offenses. Susan could have turned her back on this issue, but instead, she made a choice to get involved, combining her background in food services with her desire to do something about this issue. After 5 long years of planning, she opened a cafe to provide job training, life skills, and employment support to at-risk and formerly incarcerated young adults. Her program has already helped more than 400 young people, and it is so successful that almost all of her graduates have found work and are on the right path. You don't have to be a leader or start something new like Susan did. This has become her life passion, but it gradually developed for her. You could choose to step up and contribute to an existing organization by being an active volunteer, a committee chair, or a board member. If issues of social justice are of interest to you, there are unlimited ways to get involved. And you can fit it into an already busy life like Susan did. When you get really interested in an issue, there are ways of finding the time to help. The next story takes place on the other side of the world. It's about Afroz Shah, the young lawyer in India who got involved and led a massive effort to clean up this beach in Mumbai. It was literally buried in garbage. Cleaning up beaches was not his plan, but over time, this project became his passion. He could have turned his back on the mess. He could have declared it a hopeless cause, as everyone else had done. And he could have gotten passionate about something entirely different. But fate or karma or divine intervention or maybe pure coincidence put him on that beach at that time, and something clicked. He chose to get involved. After 3 years of hard work and the efforts of thousands of volunteers, the beach was completely transformed, and Shah managed to coordinate the entire cleanup while working almost full-time as a lawyer. His success and commitment has inspired people all over the world to do their own beach cleanups. In fact, he inspired a local young woman named Maria, who worked with our organization to launch microplastic cleanups on our beach. In turn, Maria inspired 160 volunteers who came out the very first summer to help. And other communities, after they learned about our beach cleanup up and down the lake, they started their own cleanups too. Maria was really interested in the issue of plastic in our lake. She headed down that path, and her passion grew. You don't have to take on a massive project or travel to the other side of the world to make a difference. You don't have to quit your day job. If the issues of pollution or habitat are interesting to you, there are many opportunities to get involved in our area. There's not a beach, a garden, or a park that wouldn't benefit from your involvement. Finally, I'd like to share the story of Richard Louv, one of my personal heroes. He's the author of the book, Last Child in the Woods, which introduced the term nature deficit disorder and put a spotlight on the growing disconnect between people and nature. Louvre was working with at-risk inner-city youth in San Diego when he realized that none of them had ever spent any time out in nature. So he arranged to take groups of these boys to an overnight camp outside the city. He watched how time in nature transformed them. They started to play. They relaxed. They became easier to work with. They began to behave like happy young boys instead of troubled men. He knew in his gut that time in nature was vitally important to the healthy development of our youth. He began to look around him and realize that it wasn't just inner city kids, but all kids were spending less and less time in nature and more time inside on screens. He worried about the impact of this on our youth, but also on the planet. He wondered, if we raise a generation of children who have no connection to nature, who will be the stewards of the earth? After waiting for years for someone else to do something about this issue, he finally decided to step up and get involved himself. He could no longer ignore the issue. But he was 56 years old when he wrote his first book on nature deficit disorder and launched the Children and Nature Network. He's proof that you're never too old to find your path and make a difference. You don't have to write a book or launch a global movement. If the interest of connecting people to nature resonates with you, there are many ways to get involved at our botanic garden, in our forest preserves, through scouting programs, or in school gardens. Susan Treishman, Afra Shah, and Richard Louvre are three inspiring examples of people, ordinary people, who made the decision to get involved in an issue and ended up doing something truly extraordinary. They got interested in a problem, they headed down the path, and then they became passionate about the solution. I always wanted to grow up to be like that. But first, I had to find my path. What was I going to do with my one wild and precious life? While I was raising 3 children, I got involved in a number of issues that I was really interested in: early childhood education, inner city tutoring programs, health and nutrition, bicycle advocacy. I could have headed down any one of those paths and gotten deeply engaged. But I was worried about, I started thinking more and more about environmental issues, and I started focusing on that a little bit more. About this time, I was inspired by Richard Louvre to start in outdoor classrooms. I spent many time in these gardens with children, and I could have gotten very involved in this issue because I was truly passionate about it. But at the same time, I worried more and more about the planet that these children would inherit. So I began to focus more on the growing environmental challenges. This issue, the future of our planet, was getting harder and harder for me to ignore. About this time, I was invited to a meeting with a small group of women to talk about local environmental issues. I happened to be available, and I decided to go. I chose to head down a path that interested me. That very night, we decided to start an environmental group. A few months later, I stepped up to lead it, even though I wasn't entirely sure that this was the right path for me. But our small group grew and added initiatives like an environmental fair, sustainable yard tours, waste reduction campaigns, and solar projects. The other people in other communities started looking to our group for inspiration and guidance, and they started similar groups in their towns. The more and more engaged I got in this work of environmental advocacy on the local level, the more and more passionate I became about it. Before long, it was clear to me that I had finally found my path. But what if I had not been invited to that meeting? What if I had chosen not to go? Would I have ended up on this exact path? Or would I have ended up engaged in something different but equally compelling? Who knows? But what I do know is that anyone who wants to make a difference can choose to take that first step and pick a path. We can follow our interests with the faith that the passion will develop as we get deeply engaged. And if by chance you don't get completely passionate about an issue, don't ever forget that you can still make a huge contribution in an issue that you're just really interested in, even if you're not deeply passionate about it. You have just one wild and precious life. Choose a path, get engaged, and you will make a difference. And if you're still undecided about which path to head down, you could always choose protecting the planet. We need all hands on deck, including yours. Thank you.